Every marriage hides a few secrets. But Daniel never imagined the lies in his home would be this devastating. His wife, Emily, the woman he built his world around, and Sarah, her best friend, who had become almost like family. Together, they carried a secret so dangerous it would tear his life apart piece by piece. This is the silent betrayal. Daniel Miller adjusted his tie in the mirror, the soft golden light of the bedroom casting a sheen over his neatly pressed shirt. At 33, he carried himself with the calm assurance of a man who had built a life worth admiring. His colleagues at the firm respected him, his parents adored him, and his neighbors often envied the way he seemed to have everything: success, stability, and above all, a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. Behind him, Emily appeared, draped in a soft cream dress that shimmered against her complexion. She moved with elegance, as though every gesture had been rehearsed and perfected. People often said she was the kind of woman who could silence a room simply by walking into it. To Daniel, she had once been more than that. She had been the dream that pulled him out of his long years of loneliness. "Are you ready?" Emily asked, her voice calm, almost detached, as she adjusted her bracelet. "Always," Daniel replied, forcing a smile. He studied her reflection. She looked beautiful, but her eyes seemed elsewhere. They were heading to his parents' anniversary celebration that evening. It was to be a grand affair. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone gathered to celebrate a couple who had remained together for 40 years. For Daniel, it was a reminder of what he aspired to have with Emily, a love that withstood time. But lately, he had begun to wonder if Emily wanted the same. The party hall glowed with fairy lights and soft music. Daniel moved from table to table, greeting relatives and friends with Emily by his side. She smiled politely, but her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. "Daniel," a familiar voice called. He turned to see Sarah Collins walking toward them, her face lighting up the room. Sarah had been Emily's closest friend since college, bright, cheerful, and endlessly supportive. She had become a permanent fixture in their lives, so much so that Daniel often joked she was their third wheel. But in truth, he didn't mind. She was easy to talk to, and her presence often softened Emily's sharper edges. "You both look stunning tonight," Sarah said warmly, hugging Emily before turning to Daniel. "And as always, you've managed to look like you just stepped out of a magazine cover." Daniel chuckled. "And you still exaggerate as much as you did in college." The three of them shared a laugh, though Daniel noticed how Emily's smile seemed more natural when directed at Sarah. He brushed the thought away. After all, wasn't it normal for best friends to be comfortable with each other? Later in the evening, while Daniel chatted with his uncle, his gaze drifted across the room. He caught sight of Emily and Sarah, their heads bent close together, whispering something that made them laugh. It wasn't unusual, but something in the way Emily's hand lingered on Sarah's arm made a strange unease stir within him. He sipped his drink, forcing himself to dismiss it. They're best friends, that's all it is. And yet, a seed of doubt had been planted. Life returned to its routine after the celebration. Daniel immersed himself in work, while Emily kept herself busy with her boutique. Their schedules often clashed, but he didn't mind. He believed that trust was the foundation of marriage, and he gave Emily her freedom without question. One evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner. He called out for Emily, but there was no response. He found her in the study, seated by the desk with her phone in hand. She jumped slightly when he entered, quickly locking the screen. "You're home early," she said, her tone casual, but her hands fidgeted with the pen on the table. "Yeah, the client meeting got postponed," Daniel replied, studying her face. "Who were you texting?" "Just Sarah," she said quickly. "She wanted my opinion on some design she's working on." Daniel smiled faintly. "You two never run out of things to talk about, do you?" Emily laughed, though it sounded forced. "That's what best friends are for." He let it go, but the unease in his chest lingered. Later that night, as she slept beside him, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't the fact that she spoke to Sarah. It was the way she had hidden the phone, as though protecting something fragile. For the first time in years, he wondered if Emily was keeping something from him. A week later, Daniel returned home to find the house unusually dark. He set his briefcase down and moved toward the living room. The soft murmur of voices reached his ears, Emily's and Sarah's. He paused at the entrance, their words barely audible. "Eustachius, you shouldn't have called me like that," Emily whispered, her tone urgent. "I missed you," Sarah's voice replied softly. "I can't help it." Daniel froze. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He leaned against the wall, straining to hear more, but the voices hushed, followed by the sound of laughter. When he finally entered the room, both women turned to him, their expressions carefully composed. "Daniel, you're back," Emily said with practiced ease. "We were just going over some ideas for the boutique." Sarah smiled, though her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Daniel forced a smile of his own, but inside, his world tilted. That unease, that whisper of suspicion, it wasn't his imagination. Something was happening between them, something he couldn't yet name, and though the house was filled with silence, the betrayal had already begun. Daniel stirred his coffee slowly the next morning, watching Emily from across the kitchen table. She was scrolling through her phone, her face partially hidden by the curtain of her dark hair. He wanted to ask her about last night, about the strange conversation he had overheard, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he forced himself to speak, casually. "You've been spending a lot of time with Sarah lately," he said, trying to sound lighthearted. Emily looked up, her expression unreadable. "She's been helping me with the new collection at the boutique. You know how demanding clients can be." Daniel nodded, though something inside him twisted. Her explanation was reasonable, but the way she avoided his eyes unsettled him. The silence stretched between them, heavy and cold. Emily finally set her phone down and asked, "Are you free this weekend? I thought maybe we could go out of town for a day." His chest loosened at the suggestion. "Yeah, I'd like that." But the trip never happened. On Friday evening, Emily told him Sarah needed her help at short notice. "We'll reschedule," she promised, kissing his cheek before heading out. Daniel stood by the window watching her car disappear down the street, a knot forming in his stomach. Reschedule never seemed to come. Work usually distracted Daniel from his thoughts, but lately even the office offered no escape. He found himself replaying every look, every laugh, every whispered word between Emily and Sarah. One afternoon, he left work early again, hoping to surprise Emily. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Sarah's car parked outside. Inside the house, the two women sat close together on the couch, laughing at something on Emily's phone. They sprang apart slightly when Daniel walked in. "Dan, you're home early," Emily said, her tone a little too cheerful. Sarah offered him a quick smile. "We were just looking at some design inspirations. Nothing exciting." Daniel's eyes flicked to the phone in Emily's hand. She locked the screen before setting it on the coffee table. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Daniel said. "Of course not," Emily replied quickly, but her fingers toyed nervously with her sleeve. Sarah stood. "I should get going anyway. Long day tomorrow." She gave Emily a lingering glance before slipping out the door. Daniel watched her leave, his jaw tightening. Something about that glance didn't feel like friendship. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel felt the gulf between him and Emily widening. She was physically present but emotionally absent. Conversations were short, kisses on the cheek instead of the lips, and laughter that seemed forced. One night, unable to hold it in any longer, Daniel asked, "Em, is everything okay between us?" She froze at the sink, her back to him. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you've been distant," Emily sighed, her shoulders stiff. "I'm just stressed, Dan. The boutique, clients, deadlines. It's a lot." He walked over, placing his hand gently on her arm. "I can handle stress at work, but I can't handle losing us." For a fleeting moment, she softened, her eyes glistening. But then she pulled away. "You're not losing me. You're imagining things." The words were meant to reassure, but they only deepened his doubts. That night, as Daniel lay awake, he heard Emily's phone buzz on the nightstand. She picked it up quickly, turning away as she typed a response in the dark. And for the first time in their marriage, Daniel felt like a stranger lying beside his own wife. The following weekend, Daniel attended a colleague's dinner party alone. Emily claimed she had to work late, though her boutique was closed on Saturdays. As he sipped his drink, pretending to enjoy the small talk, he caught himself staring at the happy couples around him. They looked so effortless, so connected. He wondered if people saw him and Emily the same way, or if their facade was as thin as glass, ready to shatter. When he returned home that night, the house was dimly lit. Emily wasn't in the living room or the kitchen. He finally found her in the bedroom, fast asleep, her phone clutched loosely in her hand. Careful not to wake her, Daniel picked it up. His heart pounded as he considered unlocking it, but he hesitated. He had always believed that trust was sacred, that once broken, it could never truly be rebuilt. Snooping would mean admitting that he no longer trusted her. With trembling hands, he set the phone back down and sat on the edge of the bed. He watched her sleep, her face calm and untroubled. But in the silence of that room, Daniel realized something chilling. Trust was already slipping through his fingers, like sand he could no longer hold. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the quarterly reports on his laptop, though the numbers blurred in his vision. For the first time in his life, work couldn't hold his attention. All he could think about was Emily and Sarah. That night at dinner, he decided to test the waters. "How was your day?" he asked, cutting into his steak. Emily barely looked up from her plate. "Busy. I met with a couple of clients, then ran errands. You know how it is." Daniel nodded slowly. "Funny. I ran into Claire at the grocery store. She said she saw you downtown around 3, with Sarah." Emily's fork froze midair. For a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt? Before she smiled faintly. "Oh, right. Sarah stopped by the boutique. We grabbed coffee." "Coffee at 3? Daniel pressed gently. "Is there something wrong with that?" Her tone sharpened. Defensive. "No," Daniel said quickly, backing down. "I just thought you were swamped with work." Emily sighed, pushing her food around her plate. "Dan, you're overthinking. Sarah's my best friend. If she needs me, I'm there. That's all." Daniel forced a smile, but his chest tightened. It wasn't just her words. It was the way she said them, like someone weaving a half-truth into something neat enough to be believable. Sleep had become a stranger to Daniel. He lay awake most nights, the sound of Emily's breathing beside him a haunting reminder of the distance between them. Around midnight, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She stirred, reaching for it quickly. Daniel pretended to be asleep, his eyes half open in the darkness. The glow of the screen lit her face as she typed furiously, her lips curving into the faintest smile. After a few minutes, she slipped quietly out of bed and into the hallway. Daniel's pulse raced. He sat up, debating whether to follow her. Curiosity gnawed at him, but fear held him back. What if he discovered something he couldn't unsee? Minutes later, Emily returned, her expression calm, as if nothing had happened. She slid back into bed, curling away from him. Daniel stared at the ceiling, a sickening thought forming in his mind. If it's really just friendship, why the secrecy? The following weekend, Sarah dropped by again. Daniel was in the backyard, trimming the hedges, when he heard laughter drift through the open window. He glanced inside. Emily and Sarah sat on the couch, their heads close, sharing a secret joke. Sarah's hand lingered on Emily's arm longer than casual friendship allowed. Emily didn't pull away. When Daniel stepped inside, both women straightened instantly. "Hey, Dan," Sarah greeted him with her usual cheer. "We were just catching up." Daniel smiled tightly. "Seems like you two always have a lot to catch up on." Emily shot him a quick look, her expression warning him not to push further. Sarah, however, tilted her head, her eyes sparkling with a hint of challenge, as though daring him to say what he really thought. For the rest of the afternoon, Daniel felt like an intruder in his own home. The air was filled with their laughter, their whispers, their unspoken bond. He tried to join the conversation, but every word he spoke felt like it bounced against an invisible wall. When Sarah finally left, Emily's mood shifted. She was quieter, distant again. Daniel's heart sank. It was as if Sarah carried pieces of Emily with her when she walked out the door. One late evening, as Daniel worked on his laptop in the study, he heard Emily's voice down the hall. He rose quietly and walked closer. Her door was cracked open just enough for him to hear. "I can't talk long," Emily whispered. A pause. Then softer. "I know. I miss you too." Daniel's chest tightened. Another pause. Then, "Don't worry, he suspects nothing. I'll handle it." Daniel stepped back, his throat dry, his mind spinning. He wanted to burst into the room to demand answers, but his legs refused to move. Instead, he walked back to the study and sank into his chair, his hands trembling. Emily's voice replayed in his mind like a broken record. "He suspects nothing. I'll handle it." That night, when she returned to bed, she curled against him, resting her head on his chest, as though nothing was wrong. Daniel held her, his hand brushing through her hair, but inside his world was collapsing, because deep down, he knew. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just in his imagination anymore. Daniel couldn't focus at work anymore. The reports, the meetings, the numbers, they all felt meaningless against the weight pressing on his chest. Every time Emily's phone buzzed, every time Sarah's name came up in conversation, it twisted like a knife inside him. One evening, he decided he couldn't live in the shadows any longer. "Em," he said carefully at dinner, his fork clinking against his plate, "do you think we're okay?" Emily glanced up, startled. "What do you mean? You seem distant, distracted. Sometimes it feels like you're here, but you're not really with me." She forced a smile. "Dan, I told you, it's the boutique, the pressure. You're overthinking." But Daniel caught the flicker in her eyes, that flash of panic she couldn't quite hide. For the first time, he didn't let it slide. "If there's something you're not telling me, I'd rather hear it from you than find out some other way." Emily froze, her hand tightening around her wine glass. But after a moment, she simply said, "There's nothing, Dan. Trust me." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it almost convinced him. Almost. That night, as she slept, Daniel made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for the truth to surface. He was going to find it. The next afternoon, Daniel left the office early. He parked his car a block away from Sarah's apartment and waited. At exactly 4 o'clock, Emily's car pulled up. She stepped out, glancing around quickly before disappearing inside Sarah's building. Daniel's chest tightened, his palms sweating. He sat there for nearly 2 hours, watching, his stomach churning with every passing minute. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He walked up the sidewalk, each step heavy. By the time he reached the building's entrance, his legs felt like lead. He climbed the stairs slowly, his heart pounding. As he reached Sarah's door, laughter drifted through the crack. Emily's laughter. Soft, genuine, a sound he hadn't heard in weeks. His hand trembled as he pressed against the door, pushing it open just enough to see inside. And what he saw shattered him. Emily sat on the couch, Sarah beside her. Their fingers intertwined. Sarah brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face, her touch lingering, tender. Emily leaned into it, her smile warm, her eyes filled with something Daniel hadn't seen in them for months. Affection. It wasn't platonic. It wasn't innocent. It was intimate, undeniable. The air rushed from Daniel's lungs. He stumbled back before either of them could notice, retreating down the hall, his vision blurring. The betrayal was no longer silent. It was loud, screaming inside his chest, breaking him apart. That night, Emily walked through the door as though nothing had happened. She kissed Daniel on the cheek, asked about his day, moved around the kitchen humming softly. Daniel watched her, rage and heartbreak warring inside him. Finally, he spoke. "I know where you were today." Emily froze, her back to him. Slowly, she turned. "What are you talking about?" "Sarah's apartment," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "I saw you. I saw everything." The color drained from her face. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a knife. Then Emily's lips parted, trembling. "Dan, don't," he snapped, his hands trembling. "Don't lie to me again." Tears welled in her eyes. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I didn't mean for this to happen. Daniel's heart pounded. So it's true? You and Sarah? She nodded, her shoulders shaking. It started months ago. I tried to fight it, I swear. But with her, I feel seen, understood in a way I can't explain. Daniel's voice cracked. And what about me? What about us? Emily lifted her gaze, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Dan. I do. But with Sarah, it's different. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words cut deeper than any blade. Love and betrayal, tangled together, leaving him drowning in both. The next day, Daniel couldn't stay away. He drove to Sarah's apartment, anger and desperation fueling him. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. Dan, why? His voice broke. Why her? Why us? Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, the same scent he had noticed on Emily's clothes so many times before. I didn't plan this, Sarah said quietly, wringing her hands. Emily and I, we've always been close, but one night it just shifted. She was vulnerable. I was there, and you knew she was married. Daniel cut in, his chest heaving. I know, Sarah whispered, her voice heavy with guilt. I told her to stop, to choose you, but she couldn't, and I couldn't either. Daniel stared at her, his vision blurring with rage and sorrow. You were supposed to be her friend, my friend. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I never wanted to destroy your marriage. I just fell in love with her. The words echoed in Daniel's mind, hollow and cruel. Love, that's what they called it, but all he could feel was betrayal. As he walked out of her apartment, slamming the door behind him, Daniel realized nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Daniel sat at the dining table, scrolling half-heartedly through his emails on his tablet. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, but it didn't ease the hollowness gnawing at him. He glanced at the clock. Almost 8 a.m. Emily should have been downstairs by now. For years, their mornings had followed a steady rhythm. Emily humming softly as she prepared breakfast, Daniel sipping his coffee while discussing his plans for the day, the two of them sharing a kiss before heading out. But lately, that rhythm had faltered. When Emily finally appeared, she wasn't humming. She moved quickly, almost distracted, sliding her phone into her purse. Morning, she said, leaning down to peck his cheek, her eyes darting toward the clock. You're running late again, Daniel noted, watching her grab a piece of toast instead of sitting to eat. She gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, busy week. The new campaign launch is eating up my time. Daniel wanted to believe her, but something about her tone unsettled him. Emily had always been ambitious, yes, but she used to light up when talking about her projects. Now her explanations felt rushed, as though she wanted the subject closed before it began. Maybe tonight we can have dinner together? Just us? He asked hopefully. Emily's hand froze on the doorknob. A flicker of guilt, or was it irritation, passed across her face. I'll try. Don't wait up if I'm late, okay? And then she was gone, leaving Daniel staring at the empty chair across from him. Later that week, Sarah stopped by, carrying a bottle of wine and that familiar, comforting smile. Daniel had always appreciated Sarah's easy presence. She had been Emily's best friend since college, and over the years, she had become part of their extended family, sharing holidays, vacations, and late-night conversations. Where's Em? Sarah asked, setting the wine on the counter. Still at work, Daniel muttered, grabbing 2 glasses. Seems like she's always at work these days. Sarah tilted her head sympathetically. She's been swamped. The firm's putting a lot of pressure on her. Daniel studied Sarah for a moment. She sounded sincere, but he couldn't shake the growing sense that Emily's absences weren't just about work. She barely talks to me anymore, he admitted, his voice lower than he intended. It's like, I don't even know what's going on in her life unless you tell me. Sarah reached out, touching his hand briefly. She loves you, Dan. You know that, right? She's just complicated sometimes. The warmth of her touch lingered longer than it should have. Daniel pulled his hand back gently, clearing his throat. Yeah, I know. But he didn't know, and that uncertainty was eating him alive. The following weekend, Daniel decided to surprise Emily at her office. He drove downtown, rehearsing in his mind how casually he would drop by, how it would just be a sweet gesture. But when he reached the building, Emily's car wasn't in the lot. He checked the time, Saturday afternoon. She had told him she'd be working late on presentations. His pulse quickened. Maybe she had parked somewhere else. Maybe she had taken Sarah's car. A dozen rationalizations spun through his head, but none settled his unease. He tried calling. Straight to voicemail. He texted. No reply. Hours later, when Emily finally walked through the door at home, she looked startled to see him waiting in the living room. Her hair was slightly tousled, her blouse a little too casual for office wear. Hey, she said a little too brightly. You're home early. Daniel's voice was calm, but his eyes searched hers. Where were you? Work, she answered smoothly, setting her purse down. He stood, closing the distance between them. I stopped by your office today. For a split second, Emily froze. It was small, so small most people wouldn't have noticed. But Daniel had trained himself to read details, and in that pause, he saw everything he feared. She recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. I must have stepped out for a bit. Coffee run. Daniel wanted to push further, but something inside him recoiled. He He wasn't ready for the answer he might uncover, so instead he forced a nod, pretending to accept her words, while doubt carved deeper lines inside his heart. The pattern grew worse. Emily stayed out late, her excuses piling up like bricks in a wall between them. Daniel tried to be patient, but patience turned into suspicion, and suspicion into restless nights staring at the ceiling. One evening, he found her sitting in the backyard after midnight, phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call abruptly when she noticed him watching from the sliding glass door. "Who was that?" he asked gently, though his chest was tight. "Just work," she replied too quickly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Emily, are you sure everything's okay?" Her eyes softened for a fleeting second, as though she wanted to confess something. But then the mask returned. She reached for his hand and kissed his knuckles. "I'm fine. Don't worry so much." Daniel forced a smile, but deep inside he knew something was breaking. The changes didn't come all at once. They crept into Daniel's marriage slowly, like shadows stretching across the floor at sunset. At first, they were small enough to dismiss. Tiny things he told himself were just part of the natural ebb and flow of life. Emily had always been warm, affectionate, eager to share every detail of her day. She'd curl against him on the couch with her glass of wine, laughing at his sarcastic jokes, venting about office drama, or recounting silly texts from her friends. He loved those evenings. They made him feel connected to her world. But lately, those moments were fewer. Now she retreated to the bedroom earlier than usual, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. When she did sit with him, she seemed distracted, her eyes flicking down at her screen every few minutes. Sometimes she would smile faintly at something she read, then quickly clear her expression when she caught him looking. One night, Daniel walked in from the study to find her perched at the kitchen island. She was lit only by the glow of her phone, a soft smile playing across her lips. It was the kind of smile he hadn't seen directed at him in weeks. "Who's got you grinning like that?" he asked, forcing a casual tone as he leaned against the counter. Emily startled slightly, her thumb tapping the screen before flipping the phone face down on the counter. "Oh, it's just Sarah. She sent me a meme about work. You know how she always makes fun of my boss." Her answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Daniel studied her, the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes darted toward the phone as if guarding it. "Sarah's keeping you pretty entertained these days," he said lightly, though inside his stomach knotted. Emily shrugged, grabbing a glass of water. "She's just funny, and she's been having a rough time. I'm trying to be there for her." Daniel nodded, but unease pricked at him. Sarah had always been part of their circle, but something about the way Emily said her name lately carried a different weight, something intimate, almost protective. When Emily slipped away to bed early, phone still clutched in her hand, Daniel stayed in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen. His instincts whispered that something was changing between them, but he shoved the thought down. He wasn't the paranoid type, at least not yet. The excuses began stacking up like bricks, slowly building a wall between them. It started small, Emily working late, going out for girls' nights, or running errands that somehow stretched into hours. Daniel tried to be understanding. She was busy, stressed, and everyone needed space. But the more he told himself that, the more his gut told him otherwise. One Friday afternoon, his phone buzzed at the office. "Hey, babe." Emily's voice came through the line, breathless. "I might be late tonight. Sarah's car broke down and she needs me to pick her up." Daniel frowned, spinning his chair toward the window. Sarah lived 20 minutes away. He couldn't remember the last time Emily had mentioned her car having issues. "Oh? Do you want me to swing by and help instead?" he offered. "I'm leaving the office early today." There was a beat of silence on the line. Too long. Then Emily's voice returned, too sharp. "No, I mean, it's fine. I'm already on my way. Besides, you've had a long week. Just relax." Daniel hesitated. The tone in her voice was unusual, defensive, almost panicked. "All right," he said finally. "Just drive safe." That evening, when Emily returned home, her hair was slightly damp, as though she'd showered somewhere else. The faint scent of a floral body wash clung to her, one Daniel didn't recognize. She tossed her clothes in the laundry and changed into pajamas before he could ask any questions. Over dinner, she chatted easily about Sarah's breakdown on the freeway, but Daniel noticed her avoiding his eyes. Every detail felt like it had been rehearsed, carefully slotted into place. Later that night, lying beside her in bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling in silence. He told himself he was imagining things. He told himself trust was the foundation of their marriage. But the silence between them stretched thin, brittle, as though one wrong word would shatter everything. Saturday morning brought another reminder that things didn't add up. Sarah stopped by unannounced, breezing into their kitchen with her usual charm. She was wearing a blouse Daniel recognized instantly. It was one Emily had tossed into the laundry the night before. "New shirt?" he asked lightly, keeping his voice neutral. Sarah blinked, then smiled as if nothing were amiss. "Oh, this old thing? Emily gave it to me ages ago." Emily appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. For the briefest moment, she froze when she saw Sarah's blouse. The pause lasted no more than half a second, but Daniel caught it. He always caught things others missed. "Right," Emily added quickly, forcing a laugh. "I told her to take it. It doesn't fit me anymore." Daniel smiled politely, but inside, suspicion twisted tighter. Later that evening, alone in the living room, he scrolled through Sarah's social media. She had posted a photo earlier that week, A mirror selfie taken in her apartment. Daniel almost swiped past until something caught his eye. In the reflection, hanging on the back of her chair, was a jacket he recognized. Emily's jacket. One she'd claimed she'd lost weeks ago. Daniel's chest tightened. Too many coincidences. Too many things that didn't fit. He didn't know what to do with the knowledge. Confront Emily? Confront Sarah? Or wait, gather more proof. His rational side told him not to jump to conclusions. His heart told him the truth was already staring him in the face. The following week, Daniel decided to come home early. Something in his gut told him he needed to. Pulling into the driveway, he immediately noticed Sarah's car parked outside. His pulse quickened. Sarah never visited when he wasn't home. He slipped quietly into the house. The sound of laughter drifted from the kitchen. Emily's laugh, bright and unrestrained. It was the laugh he hadn't heard directed at him in months. Then came Sarah's voice, soft and low. "You don't have to pretend around me." Daniel's heart pounded in his ears. He edged closer, careful not to be seen. Their voices blurred together, fragments of sentences floating through the doorway. Whispers, then silence, then the rustle of movement. The silence between their words felt heavy, charged, too intimate. He didn't step inside. He didn't confront them. Instead, he backed away quietly, his chest tight, his thoughts racing. He didn't have all the answers yet, but the truth was circling him, closing in like a predator. For the first time, Daniel admitted the words he'd been avoiding for weeks. Something is very, very wrong. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the glowing computer screen, but the numbers and codes blurred together. His work, the one constant that had always kept him grounded, offered no escape anymore. His mind kept looping through small fragments. Emily's phone clutched under a pillow, Sarah's blouse that wasn't hers, the laughter he wasn't part of. He rubbed his temples. Was he being paranoid? Was he creating shadows where none existed? But then he remembered Emily's damp hair that Friday night, her nervous voice on the phone, and Sarah's reflection with Emily's jacket in the background. It wasn't paranoia. It was something else. Something hidden. Something that had to be uncovered. That evening, when Emily came home, Daniel studied her closely. She dropped her purse on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and smiled faintly at him. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm fine," Daniel said, his voice steady. Too steady. He wasn't fine. He was unraveling. 2 days later, Daniel's phone buzzed with a notification. Emily had left her phone on the kitchen counter while showering. The screen lit up. One missed call, Sarah. The name burned. Daniel hesitated. The logical, careful part of him whispered, "Don't invade her privacy." But the man who had been kept in the dark for too long thought, "Privacy left the moment she started hiding things from me." He picked up the phone, thumb trembling. The call history revealed something deeper. Sarah wasn't just calling now and then. She had called nearly every night for the past 2 weeks, sometimes for hours. Daniel's stomach twisted. He placed the phone back exactly where it was and stepped away just as Emily entered, towel wrapped around her hair. "You look tense," she said softly, brushing past him. "I'm fine," he lied again. Saturday arrived with a bitter chill in the air. Emily suggested brunch downtown with friends, but halfway through she excused herself, saying she needed to check on Sarah. "I'll come with you," Daniel offered casually. Emily's fork froze midair. "No, it's fine. Sarah doesn't need a crowd." Her voice cracked slightly at the end, like a violin string stretched too tight. Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I just want to help." "I said it's fine," Emily snapped, then caught herself. Her shoulders dropped. "Sorry, I'm just stressed." Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. She avoided his gaze, fiddling with her napkin. For the first time, her mask slipped, and Daniel caught a glimpse of the weight she was carrying. Guilt, maybe? Or something darker? It happened on a Thursday evening. Daniel had left work early again, heart pounding with the certainty that the answers he needed were closer than ever. Sarah's car was in the driveway. Emily's laugh floated from the living room, warm and unguarded, just like before, but not with him. Daniel walked quietly down the hall, every step deliberate, his pulse hammering in his ears. Through the half-open doorway, he saw them, Emily and Sarah, sitting close on the couch, shoulders nearly touching, their heads bent together over something on Sarah's phone. Emily's hand brushed Sarah's arm, lingering just a second too long. It wasn't proof carved in stone, but it was enough. Enough to tell him what his gut had known for weeks. Enough to break the illusion. He stepped back before they could notice him, retreating silently to the kitchen. He gripped the counter until his knuckles went white, his chest rising and falling with heavy, uneven breaths. The truth wasn't whispered anymore. It was staring him in the face. Emily wasn't just hiding something. She was betraying him. Daniel woke the next morning with a heaviness in his chest that no amount of coffee could lift. Sleep had eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, replaying the image of Emily's hand brushing Sarah's arm, the two of them leaning in with intimacy that had no place between friends. He could have stormed in last night. He could have demanded answers, shouted until his voice broke. But Daniel was not impulsive. He was deliberate. He understood that sometimes the truth needed space to reveal itself fully, like a picture developing slowly in a dark room. At breakfast, Emily slid a plate of toast toward him, smiling too brightly. "You're quiet," she said. "I didn't sleep much," Daniel replied evenly. He kept his gaze on his coffee mug, his tone casual, almost bored. Inside, however, his mind was razor sharp. Every glance she avoided, every nervous twitch of her fingers, he catalogued them all. He decided then he would play along, pretend to be the trusting husband, while quietly tightening the noose of truth. The first test came that evening. Daniel told Emily he had to stay late at work for a last-minute meeting. In reality, he parked his car 2 blocks away and walked home under the cover of dusk. He knew Emily's patterns well. If she was hiding something, tonight would show it. Through the window, he saw her pacing, phone pressed tightly to her ear. He moved closer, careful not to be seen. Her voice carried faintly. I miss you too. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. Tomorrow? Daniel's pulse quickened. He couldn't catch every word, but he didn't need to. The tenderness in her tone, the secrecy, it was enough. He slipped away before she could hang up, circling back to his car. By the time he entered through the front door, jingling his keys, Emily was sitting calmly on the couch with a magazine in hand. Meeting was canceled, Daniel said casually, dropping his bag. Emily jumped slightly, then forced a smile. Oh, that's good. More time together. Yeah, Daniel replied, studying her. More time. His second trap came the next day. He left his laptop deliberately unlocked, an email draft open with the subject line, considering a job in Chicago. It was bait. He wanted to see if Emily would panic at the thought of him leaving, or worse, if she would welcome the distance. When he returned to his desk an hour later, the draft had been opened, cursor blinking at the end of the sentence he had typed. Maybe it's time for a change. Emily hadn't said a word, but her silence screamed volumes. The break in the facade came sooner than Daniel expected. He ran into Sarah unexpectedly at the grocery store one Saturday morning. She was by the produce section, examining apples, when she spotted him. Her smile was polite, but there was a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. Daniel, hi, she said, voice a little too high-pitched. Sarah, Daniel greeted smoothly, studying her. Emily's not with you? No, she stayed home. Headache. Sarah fumbled with the apples, nearly dropping one. Daniel tilted his head. That's strange. She told me she was going to help you this morning. Sarah froze, eyes wide for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. Oh, right, yes. She was going to, but she decided to rest instead. The lie was clumsy. Too clumsy. Daniel almost pitied her. Almost. Good, Daniel said calmly, letting her squirm. She needs rest. As he turned to leave, he caught Sarah's reflection in the mirrored freezer door. She was watching him, biting her lip, panic written across her face. He didn't smile, didn't give her the comfort of knowing whether he suspected. He simply walked away, letting the silence weigh heavy between them. That evening, Daniel made dinner. Pasta, Emily's favorite. He poured 2 glasses of wine, his movements deliberate, controlled. Emily sat across from him, looking tired. Her fork twirled pasta aimlessly. You've been distracted lately, Daniel said softly, sipping his wine. Emily glanced up, startled. What do you mean? I mean, Daniel continued, sometimes it feels like you're somewhere else, with someone else. The words hung in the air like smoke. Emily's fork clattered against the plate. That's ridiculous, she said quickly, her voice trembling just slightly. Is it? Daniel asked, his tone deceptively calm, his eyes locked onto hers, unblinking. Then tell me, Emily, why did Sarah say you were supposed to be with her this morning? When you told me you were staying home? Color drained from Emily's face. Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked like someone searching desperately for a life raft in a stormy sea. I must have mixed it up, she stammered. You're reading too much into things. Daniel leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Maybe I am, or maybe I'm finally starting to see things clearly. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Emily's hands trembled as she lifted her glass, but she didn't drink. Daniel didn't press further. Not yet. He wanted her to feel the weight of his suspicion, the quiet pressure that left no room to breathe. The confrontation had begun, not with shouting, but with silence sharper than any blade. The distance between them, the air in the house had changed. Every room carried a silence sharp enough to cut. Daniel didn't rage or accuse. He only watched. His calmness was worse than anger. Emily had started to dread his eyes, heavy and unblinking. One evening, as she folded laundry, she noticed him in the doorway, silent, watching. She jumped. You scared me? Daniel's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. Just wondering how your day was. Busy, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. He nodded slowly. I'm sure. The silence that followed pressed on her chest. For the first time, Emily wasn't sure who she was married to anymore. You're not sleeping, Sarah whispered as Emily leaned against her shoulder. Emily's voice trembled. He knows, Sarah. Not with words, but he knows. Sarah frowned. Then why hasn't he confronted you? That's what scares me. Daniel doesn't wait. He plans. And the fact that he's this calm? Her throat tightened. He's waiting for the right moment. Sarah wanted to deny it, but deep down she felt the same dread. Daniel wasn't blind, and he wasn't forgiving. Daniel began to test her. At dinner, he asked casually, How's Sarah doing? Haven't seen her around much. Emily's fork clinked. She's fine. Busy, he repeated softly, as if savoring the word. She called you last night, didn't she? Emily froze. Yes, just checking in. He only smiled faintly, letting the silence stretch until she fled the table. Later that week, Emily spotted his laptop on the counter. One tab labeled, Private Messages, Sarah. Her blood ran cold. Had he been watching? Daniel noticed her falter, closed the laptop gently and walked away. No proof, just suggestion. And suggestion was often more dangerous. Emily clung to Sarah, but even she began to crack. Maybe we need to cool this, Sarah whispered. At least until things settle? Emily's eyes filled. Don't say that. You're all I have. Sarah kissed her forehead, but her unease grew. Daniel wasn't reacting. He was waiting. That night, Emily returned home to find Daniel sitting in the dark, unmoving. God, you scared me. Why sit here with no lights? Daniel turned slowly, eyes unreadable. Just thinking. Her voice was barely a whisper. About what? His lips curved. About the truth, and how it always finds its way out. Emily's knees weakened. She realized then, the storm wasn't approaching. It was already here. Silence swallowed the room after Daniel's words. Emily froze mid-gesture, her face paling. Sarah sat stiff, eyes darting like a trapped animal. You don't understand, Emily whispered, her voice cracking. It isn't what you think. Daniel's laugh was sharp, hollow. Don't insult me. I've seen the calls, the secrets, the looks. I may have been blind, but I'm not stupid. Sarah rose quickly, clutching her purse. I should go. Daniel blocked her path. Number not this time. You don't get to walk away. Emily's composure shattered. Tears welled, guilt and fear warring on her face. For hours, denial gave way to fragile excuses. You've been distant, always buried in work, Emily pleaded. I was lonely. Daniel's voice was low, steady, burning. And so you chose her? Her silence, and the glance at Sarah, was confirmation enough. Sarah tried to speak, but Daniel cut her off. You don't get to play innocent. You've been part of this. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel turned and left, not in defeat, but in cold resolve. Days blurred with tension. Emily hovered like a ghost, her apologies weak, her eyes avoiding his. Sarah lingered near, too close to stay away. But Daniel's rage cooled into something sharper. Patience. He watched, waited, collected fragments of truth, phone logs, receipts, contradictions. Emily grew restless, unsettled in her own home, afraid of the silence Daniel carried like a weapon. One morning, Daniel rose with clarity. He would no longer be the broken husband. He softened his tone, asked about her day, touched her hand. Confusion flickered in Emily's eyes. At night, Daniel gathered evidence, piece by piece, turning betrayal into ammunition. It wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about power. And soon Emily and Sarah would feel its weight.